Good morning. I'm wearing the colors. I live in Kansas City now. I'd like to share a story with you this morning. It's a story about myself and when I was a little girl. I grew up in the South, in case you can't tell. I grew up in Nashville, and I was kind of a child that was raised by a village. My aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, and my parents. And I went to church as a child, and I always wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to do the right thing. I absolutely adored and loved my grandfather above all the people in my life. He was my primary caregiver because when everyone else went to work, I stayed with him. And he was the kindest, the wisest, the most patient person. I knew this as a child that I ever met. I just adored him. So fast forward, years later. My grandfather was probably about my age now, and he began to show signs of dementia. He had been a carpenter in his earlier years, but had injured his hip and had been on disability for quite some time. I had never known him to work. But he began walking around the house and asking, "Where's my hammer?" And "I've missed my bus," and putting weird things in the refrigerator, and you know how it goes. Well, back at that time, there weren't a lot of answers like we have today. So the family took him to the doctor, who also referred him to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist interviewed him. Then I was present in the living room as the psychiatrist was sitting there calling a family meeting together. And he said, "There's nothing wrong with him. He's doing this for attention. So whenever he asks for something, just ignore him. Just ignore him." So that was the directive that was given to me by the family, and I heard that given to them by this doctor. So I'm 14 years old. I'm in the house with my grandfather. It's in the afternoon. I'm upstairs in my aunt's bedroom with my transistor radio listening to the top 10 countdown. It was one of those lazy days of summer, when my grandfather came out of the bathroom onto the landing where all the bedrooms circled around this landing. And he called to me. He needed help pulling his trousers up. Well, I knew not to say yes, not to help him, because I had been instructed that when he asked for help, he's just seeking attention. So I ignored him. Then I hear him shuffle a little bit closer because he knew I was in the bedroom. And he called me by name, "Donna, Donna, I need your help. Come help me." And I curled up into a fetal position, into the corner of the bed, into the corner of the wall, and everything in me wanted to disappear. I wanted to become invisible. "Please don't ask me again." And he did. He got all the way within a foot of the door, still calling to me for help, and I never answered. Then I heard him shuffle away into his bedroom. That stayed with me until I was in my 40s. And I could not tell this story without just these bitter tears of remorse and pain. And when I was in seminary, studying to become a minister, we did this exercise on forgiveness, and we paired off into twos, and we were to share something that we had been carrying, something that was interfering with our own sense of worth and happiness. It could be anything. It could be a resentment against someone. And this came up for me. It was a bitterness I had about myself. And my partner, I never will forget this, she took my hands after I told my story through just sobbing and sobbing. And she said, okay, we're going to envision now what it could have been like. She said, I want you to tell me the story again from the way you wish it had happened. So when I get to the part about hearing my grandfather call, of course I get up, I go immediately to him. I help him to become clothed completely. I hug him, I tell him how dear and precious he is to me, and he says the same to me. And in that moment, I was freed. I was freed because on a quantum level, there was a different energy released. Do you know, our mind and our subconscious doesn't know the difference between something that really happens and something we imagine. And that's why our thoughts are so powerful, because our subconscious will bring into manifestation whatever it is that we hold in consciousness. So when I changed my story and I chose to believe the truth, which is that I loved him dearly and he loved me dearly, I experienced forgiveness for myself, and I was set free. This is an example of how sometimes we can do the wrong thing for the right reason. You see, the right reason I had was to do the right thing. I had been told what the right thing for him was. But I did the wrong thing. Love always calls us into engagement, never avoidance, and negation, always into engagement. That's one of the tools of learning to forgive, is to be able to sit quietly and feel whatever it is that's disturbing you, and to be able to see it differently in your mind's eye and feel it differently in your heart. Because when you can do that, sincerely do that, the energy around it shifts. And the blockage that's you've been carrying in your energy field for so long opens, and you feel that relief and freedom. So let me fast forward to another story about my life, one that's very, very, very recent. I have had 2 cats in my life for 15 years. For most of their lives, they lived in Virginia on 2 acres. They were indoor, outdoor. They had the run of the place. And when I moved from Virginia, I moved here to Kansas City, and I live on the 10th floor of a high-rise in a condominium. I had a farmhouse in Tennessee where my mother lived. So I took my cats down to my mother, and I said, here, you'll love this farm. So they had 2.5 acres, a smokehouse, a creek, a funky old house. They were in cat heaven. You know what I mean? Just in cat heaven. And then the time came when my mom could no longer live there by herself. This happened last year. She moved out of that house, no place for my cats to go, but here. So I bring them to my 10th floor condominium, where that becomes their entire world for the past year. Their little paws no longer feel the green grass, you know? And believe me, it was harder on me than them. My home is not appropriate for cats. Let me just say, it's not appropriate for cats. I have leather furniture, they have claws, not a good deal. I have white carpet, they barf, not a good deal. So for a year now, I have had my cats. They were aging. One was arthritic, could no longer jump, and was going into kidney failure. The second one was a diabetic, and really needed insulin care that I was unable to provide because my schedule is so erratic. And yet, I could not bring myself to do the right thing for my cats. And finally, when two people that I know love me dearly, and I love them dearly, and they love my cats dearly, they said, "Donna, it's time to put your cats down." I made the decision the night before, and the next day I get up with a steely resolve. I'm going to do this. I've got to do this. And the main reason that I knew I had to do this was I knew for the next 6 weeks I would be traveling, and that I would be paying somebody to come in and clean the litter box and feed them twice a day, and still they would be alone most of the time in this little condo, right? So I put them in there. They wake me up in the morning, the sweetest little way. One little cat's down here, meow, meow, the one who couldn't jump anymore, and then the one that could jump was pawing my face. It's 5 a.m., get up, feed us, because they know my routine. So I get up and feed them, and they purr and they purr. I've got a steely resolve. I can't stop for a moment to even appreciate this. It's like, okay, here's your last meal. I got to do what I got to do. And so I put them in their cases, their little carrying cases, and they're crying their heads off like they always do, and I take them down to the vet, who I'd already called and had an appointment. And all I could do was leave them there. I can't be present to this. I just need to leave them. I'm donating the cases. Here's their cat food. Here's everything. Goodbye. I turned and walked out of the door. And I had a regret. I did this a month ago. 2 days later, I'm on the road and I'm all over the place. But I have carried a regret. And the regret has been this: I did the right thing for the wrong reason. Because the story I've been telling myself is, I did it for my own convenience. I did it to relieve my own suffering. And it was only yesterday, as I was really delving deeply into some of the grief that I was carrying around this, that it occurred to me that I deserve compassion as much as the next person. And I had not been giving myself compassion. So as I'm here on earth in this dimension, struggling for forgiveness from my cats, I had this funny little scenario that they're over in kitty heaven, struggling with their kitty karma, because they are trying to forgive me for not doing this a year ago, when it was truly time a year ago. These human dilemmas we struggle with on a daily basis. And if we don't take time to really be with them and allow ourselves the opportunity to process and learn from them, it gets all tangled up in our energy field, and we get very gunked up inside. And we get angry, we get depressed, we get stressed. Do you know, when I think about forgiveness through compassion, which is what Duke asked me to speak about today, I looked up the word compassion because I want to make sure that I'm not assuming I know what compassion is. And the definition of compassion is the ability to sympathize or empathize, either one, and there's differences between those two, subtle distinctions. Sympathy means you feel for someone, but empathy means you feel with them. I feel for you that you're going through a rough time. That's sympathy. I feel what you're feeling is empathy. But to have either of those feelings with the desire to end the suffering, that's compassion. So compassion has an action component. It's empathy with a desire to end the suffering. So I sit with this and I think, okay, the compassionate thing would be to look at these situations and say, who's suffering? Were my cats suffering? No, I was. Was my grandfather really suffering? No, I was all these years. So the compassionate action is to work with my own consciousness, to free myself of these little traps that I've set for myself since early childhood, when I wanted to always do the right thing. It's a type of arrogance I have come to see, to hold myself to a standard above that of everyone else. So I have no problem forgiving other people. You make a mistake, well, I make a mistake, oh. I mean, how arrogant. It's true. I am no different than anyone else, and I deserve the same compassion in dealing with myself and the mistakes or the missteps that I have done in my life as much as the next person. To me, forgiveness begins with the self. When I look at what Jesus taught us, there were 2 commandments that were given. Love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. You put these 2 together, and you have a trinity here. Love God, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And it begins with the self. That word as means in the nature of. In the same way that you love yourself, that's the capacity you have for loving anyone else, let alone feeling the love of God. Why is this true? It's true because you are the only one living and moving and having a being in your reality. The only power that you have is the power to work within your own consciousness, to begin to see things in their true nature, to release what no longer serves, and to be compassionate with yourself. Jesus also taught us if someone slaps you, you turn the other cheek. If someone asks for your coat, you give them your cloak also. If someone forces you to walk a mile with them, then you walk 2. And I don't think the purpose of this teaching is to turn us into doormats or to teach us that our own feelings and needs and desires don't matter, which is often what I interpreted it to mean as a child. Jesus is not saying that. Jesus, who was a consummate quantum guy, gave us these examples so that we might learn how to interrupt the pattern. So when someone betrays you, annoys you, undermines you, sabotages you, just in general ticks you off, for no good reason, interrupt that pattern. You cannot fix another person. That's their reality. It's none of your business what their reality is. Your reality is what you think of that person, what you think of yourself, and how you deal with yourself in that context. To interrupt a pattern of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, which he said is the old law, that even exchange, to be able to get to the place in consciousness where we really can set ourselves free, where we really can have a fundamental shift in the way that we approach life and the way we treat ourselves and other people. In order to do that, we have to come from the heart. It's not a head thing. When we come from the heart, we are taught from that highest of wisdoms what is the right thing to do for the right reason. The heart has the true spiritual power. Without that, it's simply force. You're forcing yourself to do something. You're forcing another person, apologize to me now, and then I'll forgive you. Nah, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way because in truth, we are all innocent. We are, every one of us, innocent. And in order to know that true essence of innocence, not that we haven't made mistakes, but that innocence comes from our spiritualness that we have. And in order to touch that, we have to be centered in the heart. And do you know what that takes? That takes being still. It takes opening your mind and your heart and being willing to see whatever the heart reveals. And what the heart will reveal every single time is your innocence. And when you see your own innocence and you have compassion for yourself, it's easy to give that to other people. See, it's never about another person, no matter what they have done or failed to do or refused to do. They're in your reality, reflecting something to you. And when we go to the heart, we get the wisdom that sets us free. You know, some of you know, it's no secret, I've been having a love affair with Leonard Cohen, the musician and writer. All summer long, I have listened to his music, and there's one particular song called Come Healing. And it's absolutely beautiful, and it's filled with gems of wisdom. But one of the refrains says, "O troubled dust concealing an undivided love, the heart below is teaching to the broken heart above." You see, when we look at all the dust and we allow the dust to obscure the undivided love, we're fragmented. We're fragmented. And it is only when we become still that the dust can settle and that heart, the heart beneath the dust, reveals itself and teaches to the broken heart above. And the teaching is always this. Whenever there is a need for forgiveness, be it for yourself, your spouse, your kids, your neighbor, your coworker, your dog, your cat, whenever there is a need for forgiveness, that's a call to return to love. And it's not enough just to hear that call. There's action that's required, because that's the full definition of compassion. Feeling the empathy or the sympathy with the desire to end the suffering. And so an action is required. The question becomes, what can I do in this moment to see this right? To free myself from this experience of decreeing something not fair, decreeing somebody else not worthy. What can I do to free myself from this illusion? Ask that of your heart, and you will get the answer. And you will be set free, because you will know the truth, and the truth sets us free. We will know that we are doing the right thing for the right reasons, and we will be able to do it with power and with confidence and with compassion. And the result is living with a peaceful mind and a peaceful heart and a peaceful spirit. Namaste to you. So let's take this into meditation, and I invite you to just begin to feel the energy around your heart And maybe something came up for you in the last 15 minutes or 20 minutes. Or maybe it's been circling around for a couple of weeks. Or maybe it's been there for years and decades. Just hold that in your heart for a moment.
And it is true that every thought is a prayer.
For we can never be separated from the goodness of God. We live and move and have our being in a miraculous world. It is through forgiveness that we clear out the false beliefs, the assumptions, those hard places within us, the harshness. Just give it up and realize that who you are here and now is a beautiful spiritual being. Love can never die because it's born in us in a place that never dies. And all there is love. So we are given this day, a fresh new day. We can choose to see the world differently. We can ask for the song to return to our hearts, for the joy to move our feet and dance to the rhythm of life. Or we can choose to spend one more day punishing ourselves with remorse and regret, with self-righteousness. The key is held in our hands. And so let us just rest for a moment and ask the wisdom of the heart. What is mine to do? Thank you, precious Spirit. Thank you for your healing touch. Your presence sets the captives free. It liberates us to be who we came here to be. We are centered and poised in the reality of your love and your power. And we go forth this day to create that which is of beauty. We go forth this day to share that which is true. And we see in one another your divine spirit reflected back in all situations. This is our prayer and our decree, and so it is. And we vow to let it be. Amen.
Talk about a child who's been forgiven. Here is one. Here is one. Talk about a child that's been forgiven. Here is one. Here is one. Talk about a child